So Austin is a theist who's calling us from Colorado. Austin's pronouns are he, him. And Austin wants to talk about the two principles of Manichaeism. So welcome, Austin. What's up?
Hello, how are you?
Not too bad.
Hi there.
How are you?
Hello, Demore.
Hmm.
I'm good. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah. So what is it you wanted to say about Manichaeism?
The two principles of it are correct.
The two principles of it are correct.
Yes.
Are there only two principles? Are there only two principles, or are there a bunch and two of them are right?
The two, it's like a form of dualism, kind of like the two main principles.
I know what Manichaeism is. I don't know what the two principles you're talking about and whether they're the only. For example, if I'm right about two things, does that mean I'm right about everything? No.
No, it has more principles, but the two main ones are that one.
All right. So I'm going to have you tell us. I'm going to have you explain to us what the two principles are, and then we can figure out whether or not we agree that they're true, and what that tells us about anything else. So, what's the first principle?
The two principles are kind of together, but it is basically the universe is formed by material matter, and it is kind of one is kind of like there's a chaotic force within the universe that causes chaos or degradation, and then there's another force, like a force of order and goodness, that causes but cannot reverse the chaos itself, but it can do momentary pockets of order within the chaos.
Okay. Are you suggesting that like the chaotic force is just what we describe as entropy?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. See, my understanding of Manichaeism is that there's more to it than this, but if I agreed, and I'm not saying I do, but if I agreed that there's entropy in the universe that is degrading it and localized pockets of order, I'm not willing to say goodness, because goodness may be a subjective assessment. So if I agree that there's entropy and localized order, why on earth why do I need Manichaeism?
Because that would be the religion itself that kind of like gives off the that exists, that teaches about the universe and corresponding actions.
Austin, here's what I'm asking. Manichaeism holds that there are souls, right?
Technically, yes.
Yeah.
It's not how Christians think of a soul, but it's similar to that.
Well, Manichaeism believes that there's a soul that either returns to paradise or is reborn, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, there's more than those two.
Is that true?
To an extent, yes.
To what extent, and how do you? Because I don't believe there are souls at all. I don't believe there's a paradise, and I don't believe that there's rebirth in the sense of souls being reborn. So what part of it is true, and how do you know?
That there is energy within us that is not physical.
That's not a soul, and that energy isn't going to a paradise, is it?
It leaves the material world, or what we leaves the material body.
You think energy leaves the material world? How do you know that?
Because energy cannot be material at a certain extent, to a point.
What energy can or can't be doesn't tell you that it leaves the world. Here, Manichaeism holds that there are sins, right? Like fornication, procreation, possession, cultivation, eating meat, drinking wine. Those are sins that force you to be reborn, right?
Uh, Objectively wrong things that would keep you stagnant.
I'm sorry.
And
I gave you I'm sorry, Austin. I gave you a very specific list that I got from looking up Manichaeism and what it views about certain things. Does Manichaeism have a notion of sin where eating meat, drinking wine are sins that would cause your soul to be reborn instead of going to paradise?
yes,
How do you know that's true?
I never said it was a true, but it's more like a mythology.
I literally just
Kinda
asked
like-
you, is that true? And you said yes. And when I asked, how do you know it's true? You just said you didn't say it was true.
Something it's not in the true way that you are thinking I'm meaning true.
I'm
Does that
sorry.
make sense?
I
Sorry
only
if I'm
have
being
one
confusing.
understanding of true, and true is when a claim aligns with the facts. And so if Manichaeism teaches that you have a soul, or you are a soul, whichever, and that when you die, your soul will return to paradise or it will be reborn. And the only way it goes to paradise is if you avoid fornication and procreation and eating meat and drinking wine. And I say, and this is what Manichaeism teaches. And then I ask you if it's true. In what context is it true other than actually true?
How a metaphor can be true, but also not.
No.
Terrible.
I don't give a shit about metaphors. And even if I were to agree that the principles that you talked about, that there's entropy and pockets of localized order, even if I agreed that those were true, that wouldn't tell us whether Manichaeism's view on souls and rebirth was true, would it?
It wouldn't.
Cool. So I can throw out the soul and I can throw out all the rest of Manichaeism and still believe that there's entropy and localized order and not care at all about Manichaeism because those other aspects of Manichaeism haven't been demonstrated to be true, right?
Yes, you can
Cool.
absolutely throw out anything you don't like about Manichaeism.
Cool. Then we're done. Thanks.
Wait,
Wait, what?
hello.
Wait for what?
It's Manichaeism is not just a religion; it's also a philosophy. But
I don't give a shit. I
philosophy.
don't know, Austin, you're not understanding. I don't care. I don't care what it is, whether it's a religion, a philosophy. None of that matters. I care what it claims. And those claims that are true, demonstrably, I will accept. And the rest of them, I'm not going to accept. And so nobody needs Manichaeism. And what you're doing is saying because Manichaeism, convinced you of this notion about chaos, that therefore there's reason to believe that what it says about a soul is also true. It's just not really true, just metaphorically true. And I don't care. I care about what's actually true. So I don't need Manichaeism. And why would anybody need the rest of Manichaeism if they already accept that there's entropy and localized order? What do they get out of it?
Religious right.
They get what?
Religious right. Oh, sorry.
I don't know what you're saying. Religious what?
RIGHT.
Religious right?
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah, I don't want that. I don't need it. I care about what's true. I don't need a religion.
Okay, that's valid.
I mean,
yeah.
why would you? Yeah, go ahead, Darante. I'm sorry.
No, I just I had a question because Austin, when you opened up, you said when we're talking about this chaos and this localized order, you said, okay, Manichaeism has it right here, and because it as a religion has it right here, then we should follow. It's accurate. And then we walk through that, and then Matt shows you how, okay, but these other things are absolutely flawed. And then you say, okay, well, it's not only a religion, it's a philosophy. Now, my question is, if we go back to the things that we can agree on that have some truth to them, which is, dealing with the entropy and the localized order. And you said this is the only religion that has this, which is, number one, not true. But then also physics has this, addresses this, gives utility for this, and gives a measurable way to understand this, to comprehend this. Why would you neglect physics in exchange for a religion or a philosophy in this case? That's just from my curiosity.
I never said it disregarded other religions. It actually accepts all other religions as well.
No. Austin. I didn't say it disregarded other religions. I said, why, if physics has these two components that you said convinced you, if physics already has these components and has all of these other components that are accurate, why would you choose to adhere to something that has two out of maybe 500 things accurate? Why would you not just say, oh, well, if physics has this, this is what I'll attach myself to so that I can actually have an understanding of it?
There isn't only two, but the two main ones are the two main principles of it, which is those two principles.
I don't think you're understanding my question, Austin.
I am not. Can you rephrase it?
Yeah. Well, you said those two principles are the things that convinced you, but I'm saying physics has that. It has those principles. And not only those two principles, but several more. So if you were choosing what you're attaching yourself to what something got right, and Matt just did a great job of illustrating that Manichaeism, out of everything we just talked about, it seems that this two principles that you boil down to just one principle is actually the only thing that's likely right out of all of it. And then physics has this larger success rate where not only does it have those two things right, but have a whole bunch of other things right. Why would you look at something that has that higher success rate of being right and look at the thing that only has a 1% chance of being right and say, that's the truth that I want to attach myself to?
Because Manichaeism is an adaptive religion that use.
Why does it need to be a religion that you attach yourself to? Why is the requirement that it needs to be a religion? Why isn't the requirement that it needs to be accurate?
That is the requirement, that it has to be accurate.
But we've already demonstrated that Manichaeism is not accurate.
Then it would adapt to adapt to the accuracy and change it. Like how Matt was saying about how you could take away the Stowe claims and put it towards more of a metaphorical claim, but it is still valid information, as in mythology is still a valid subject or knowledge that you should learn, but it is not true. And just like how a philosophy can claim a parable or an analogy or something like that.
I still don't think so. What you're saying is because something can be useful. So like, because telling people stories about Little Red Riding Hood is useful, we should teach people that Little Red Riding Hood is true until we decide that it's not?
More, not that it's true, but that the message itself is true. Kind of like the boy who cried wolf. The boy who cried wolf isn't true in that sense, but the message it gives off is true, how you shouldn't
But you
lie.
do, Austin, you do realize we're not talking about the message, though. We're talking about the accuracy of the claim.
Yeah, it's
like,
like saying
are
you're
you
an
able
Aesop's
to delineate that?
fabulist.
Yeah.
You want to convince, I'm an Aesop's fabulist, and you should be an Aesop's fabulist too, because the story in this particular fable about the boy who cried wolf, that's a valuable lesson. So we should all be Aesop's fabulist. What is the desire that you have to get people to adopt a label that is useless and meaningless and not tied to truth or anything productive?
It is tied to truth and productivity. Does that make sense?
It's not true. It's like
you can't
saying,
even use it to have a productive conversation.
Yeah.
What? I didn't catch it. Can you say that again?
Yeah, at this moment, you haven't even been able to use it to create cultivate a productive conversation.
Why
At this
should
moment,
we?
your
Because
whole
I'm
stance has been, yeah.
I mean, so real briefly, an individual named Mani claims to have received a revelation from a spirit, which he would later call his twin. He would be inspired by Zoroastrian teachings and call himself an apostle of Christ, according to Augustine, and claim to present the correct versions of teachings that were corrupted by the followers of Adam, Abraham, Noah, Zoroaster, Buddha, and Jesus. Those and believes in souls, has claims about the origins of evil, views good and evil as actual extant cosmic entities that are in a divine struggle of light and darkness in human beings. All of these things were presented as true. You now, because you found something in Manichaeism that you can find ties to some physics truth and other things in that religion that you think are metaphorically true, now all of a sudden you seem to be advocating a religious system that makes claims that you acknowledge are not demonstrably true. There is not sufficient evidence to conclude that there are souls. Do you think that you're going to go to paradise in any actual sense ever?
in the actual sense, no.
No. So that makes the religion a lie that is co-opting minor truths to prop up claims that are not.
But if you can demonstrate a cosmic entity that is equivalent to entropy, would that be also valid as a principle?
Well, first of all, that would be completely irrelevant to whether or not we should adopt Manichaeism. But showing, I don't know what you mean by demonstrating a cosmic entity that's equivalent of entropy. There's already entropy. Can you demonstrate a cosmic agent that is responsible for entropy?
A cosmic entity, a cosmic entity that is the embodiment of darkness.
What's that?
Equivalent of a black hole. And then the opposite of that would be a white hole.
No. Okay, here's the problem, Austin. I apologize. You have become hyper-focused on finding ways to take things that are demonstrably false in reality or unable to be demonstrated to be true in reality and finding some metaphoric sense in which they're true. That is how delusions are built. This is how people deceive themselves into believing more than they should. At this point, Manichaeism, I'll pick 5 things. Manichaeism believes there's a soul and that the soul will either go to paradise or be reborn. That's 2 claims. That it is a sin to procreate, and that there is cosmic good and evil in a struggle. That's 4. And number 5 is that the universe is formed by material matter with a chaotic force that is causing universal degradation, while there's another force of order that you want to call goodness. Even if the 5th one were true, the other 4 are not, or not demonstrably true. And if I tell you that I'll sell you the house that I'm in, and I list 5 features of this house, and it turns out 4 of them are not true and 1 of them is, do you think you'd have good cause to file a lawsuit against me for false advertisement?
Yes.
Yeah. And therefore, I now say that you've given us good reason to file a false advertisement claim against Manichaeism. I had no idea. I had no idea that Manichaeism was ever going to be discussed again by anybody. It's mostly a dead religion. I didn't expect to be talking about it today. And yet you called in and all you did was provide good reasons to further reject Manichaeism.
Okay. Even if can a religion be good or beneficial for something or rational, even if it is based on fiction?
Yep, absolutely.
How would you make basic Christianity rational?
Okay. You the way you think is amazing. I think I'm following because you basically just said, is it possible for a false religion to still do good things? Yes, you can accomplish good things with a lie. And then you asked, how can I make Christianity rational? Not my job, not relevant to anything we've discussed here, not anything I'm interested in. Go talk to the Christians and see if they can make it rational.
But making a religion rational, like Christianity, was the basis of Manichaeism, like how it
No,
took
see,
away
and
the Old Testament and
Austin, thank you. You have further proved that Manichaeism is bullshit because instead of getting a revelation from a spirit that corrects things, a revelation from a being, as it claims, you're now saying basically they found problems and holes in other religions and tried to patch them up. And what that means is they have a flawed assumption that there's some truth at the foundation of religion. So, what you're doing by pointing to this metaphorical truth is essentially trying to do to Manichaeism what you think Manichaeism did to Christianity. You want to rehabilitate it because there's some claim in there that you find valuable and some metaphoric truths that you can respin. I have no interest in trying to rehabilitate bad ideas.
Yeah.
why would you say just because idea is fiction, why would that inherently make it bad?
I didn't say it made it bad. I only care if it's true, not whether or not you think it's good or bad, or I think it's good or bad. I only care if it's true. I'm one of those people who, if I have terminal cancer, I want to know. There are other people who don't want to know. I care about the truth. You are not going to convince me to adopt a religion that I either know to be false or have no good reason to believe is true just because you think it's good and would be effective somewhere. Is Manichaeism better than secular humanism when it comes to ethics?
What is secular humanism?
Well, there you go. You should go read the Secular
Yeah.
Humanist Manifestos and study up on secular humanism. You can go to my personal YouTube channel where just in November or December, probably is when it went live, I talked about secular humanism. But essentially, the core of secular humanism is that we humans, recognizing that we are here and sharing space, must come up
Yeah.
with the best ways to address ethics and morals and what we're going to use as data and what the value of humans are going to be, because we don't have the luxury of reaching out beyond us. There are no gods that apparently want to explain anything to us or tell us anything. There is no source beyond us that we can appeal to for help. We're here. It's up to us to solve and address it. And therefore, secular humanism advocates the use of science, directed by empathy and compassion, to address problems with humans and come up with better solutions. It doesn't make claims about souls or sins. It doesn't need to rehabilitate any religion. Humanism looks at human beings, evaluates who we are, what we do, and then tries to build the world that is better based on those principles. That's secular humanism in a bucket.
How would you prove a philosophy to be true? Kind of like how Plato does acknowledge an afterlife in the myth of but that one is clearly a myth or like that. But would you claim that him referencing an afterlife would be him affirming that there is an afterlife?
I don't accept. First of all, how would you prove a philosophy? I hate the label a philosophy because what it's implying there is that Plato has a philosophy and you must accept all of it. Well, I'm not a Platonist. I also am a huge admirer of David Hume, and most of my epistemology jives exactly with David Hume. And I've described myself on some occasions as a humanist, as someone who advocates for Hume's principles. But that doesn't mean I agree with everything that Hume said. And I will happily point out the things that are false in Hume's saying, rather than finding something false in what he said and going, is there a way this is metaphorically true that I can No, I only care about truth.
Yeah.
I don't need to prove a philosophy is true. Truth applies to concrete statements individually. If there's a philosophy that has 100 statements and 99 of them are true, and the 100th one is not true, then you can say, I'm a subscriber to this philosophy except for item number 100, and you're probably okay. But you don't have to say, I subscribe to this philosophy at all. You can take those 99 things and call it something else, or not call it something else, and just say, here's 99 things that I am convinced are true.
What if the philosophy is that philosophy, like how if you take the 99 that are true, that are good, and encompasses that and take those what is true into your own philosophy, and then disregard or keep but don't use
That's literally
what
what I
is
just
bad.
said. That's literally what I just said. You take the things that are true, you get rid of things that are bad, and stop worrying about the labels and whether or not you fit in some metaphorical bucket.
Sure, no, that, yeah, I agree. That is one of the aspects of Manichaeism is to take what is good, but it does have
No, it's
labels.
not. No,
Like
okay,
is good.
Austin, no. We're going to stop here and move on to some other callers, because when we finally get to this, you're like, that's a principle of Manichaeism, is to take what's true and what's good and get rid of the rest. Now you're just making shit up to make it seem more palatable, because Manichaeism, the bigger things are that there's a struggle between good and evil, and it's a cosmic struggle that goes beyond. They have 3 different creation events, essentially, within Manichaeism. They believe that it's a sin to procreate, or the principles are that it's a sin to procreate, and that you will continue to be reborn if you procreate. Fuck Manichaeism. I'm going to fuck. Which, by the way, fornication is also a sin on theirs. Manichaeism, if followed strictly, would lead to the extinction of humanity.
Yep.
That's why it only followed strictly to the leaders, kind of like how they practice what they preach. But anyone below them can do that. They can get married. They can eat meat. They can do whatever they personally think, because it's
but they won't make it to paradise.
Freedom-based
That means
morality.
Your description means that only the leaders will make it to paradise, and everybody else will keep getting reborn.
Yes.
Yeah.
That is what Manichaeism is.
Not only is that not demonstrably true, I find it to be evil and stupid.
Why would you say it's evil?
Oh my goodness.
Why would the only people who get to go to paradise be the ones who refuse to engage in a core aspect of the robust, complex psychological human psyche of engaging in sex and interactions with other people in ways that enrich lives and produce more people to enrich more lives? The notion that it's a sin to reproduce or fornicate is already a disqualifier for me following that religion. And not just because I'd like to have sex. I'm 56. I've had plenty of sex. If I never have sex again for the rest of my life, I'll be okay. But the fact that if you had it once, Manichaeism is about denying yourself some aspects of the human existence. Some of them may be beneficial to avoid. Some of them are neutral, but portrayed as beneficial, like drinking wine. You can drink wine. You could have a thimble of wine every single day for your entire life. You are harming no one and nothing. You are not getting drunk. And yet, according to Manichaeism, you're sinning and making sure that you are reborn. So if that's the case, if Manichaeism turns out to be true, why would I want to go to paradise instead of just being reborn?
there is no definitive way to prove that there is an afterlife. So it's more
That's not
like
what I
if
asked.
you uh, could you repeat this question?
Sure.
Like
If
can you point-
Manichaeism is true, why would I want to go to paradise instead of being reborn?
your own personal opinion, or yeah, your own, if you personally want to do that, you can. Like how some people want or don't like sex or are asexual, they would be more valid in not doing that. It is their
So let
personal
me
right
ask you
not
this, Austin.
to do that.
According to Manichaeism, if I were to convert to Manichaeism today, I would have zero chance of going to paradise. I'm already guaranteed to just be reborn, correct?
Not yes, in a sense.
Okay. So when I'm reborn, do I remember my previous existence at all?
No, you don't.
No. So once again, I start over again with no knowledge and understanding of Manichaeism. And so essentially Manichaeism only works if you get a human being before they fornicate, before they procreate, before they own anything, before they harvest anything, before they eat any meat and drink any wine. And that's just 6 of some of the lists of sins. What are the odds of finding a human being who has done none of those things? I think it's about 0%.
Yes.
Okay. Which means the odds of anyone converting to Manichaeism and actually going to paradise is pretty much 0%.
Yes. Why would you want to go to paradise?
I don't want to go to paradise, but Manichaeism makes that the goal, right?
It's not the main goal. The main goal is a beneficial society. Kind of like if you are being reincarnated.
No, you're just wrong.
Right.
Manichaeism is not looking for a beneficial society. If that were the case, paradise would be listed not as paradise, but as the place you want to avoid. And Manichaeism has a system that logically leads to no one ever going to paradise. So now all Manichaeism is, hey, you guys are going to be reborn, but we can't prove it.
Yeah. And it's interesting. You said it leads to a more beneficial society, but one of the tenets of it is no procreation. How do you get a continuation of society if there's no procreation? As Matt demonstrated, if people actually follow this doctrine, then there wouldn't be any humanity, period. So it seems to me that the only way humanity actually continues is to not follow Manichaeism. It seems like the Manichaeists who are not following the doctrines are the ones who are doing the right thing, which now just makes me, then what's the whole point of even having the doctrine if the people who are doing more are the people who are never going to go to paradise anyway, just the people who are living lives? That's how life continues, is by not being a Manichaeist. Like you've definitely showed us a reason not to want to be this.
This is the reason that Manichaeism largely doesn't exist today. Mani was born in 261, and the religion died out, and it just gets referenced and pulled back up by either confused individuals who think that metaphors are enough to go on, or people who have gotten fed up with the other religions but still can't quite let themselves be free to say, you know what? I don't need a religion. There's no reason to believe there's a God. Nope, they're flailing around desperate for something. So they go back into the archives. Hey, let's try out Zoroastrianism. Let's try out Manichaeism. Let's try out the Norse gods and see if Thor will rub my back for me. It is ridiculous. Instead of looking at all of these old dead religions that make claims that aren't demonstrably true and some other claims that are contradictory and problematic, why not look at the world you actually inhabit and find a better way to improve that world so that it's better for all of us and future generations. And if it turns out you get reborn, you won't remember any of this shit anyway. So everything everybody ever told you about Manichaeism just goes away. So last question for you, Austin. Have you ever sinned according to Manichaeism?
Yes.
Okay. See you in the next life, man.
Oh wait, can the the Manichaeism doesn't allow procreation, but in a society that is procreation a good thing? And if so, why? And it's a necessary part of society, kind of like how gay people cannot procreate, but we don't discourage gayness because...
Yes, they can. Yes, they absolutely can. Gay people procreate all the time and have for the entire history of humanity. You need to go off and do some studying, Austin, because you bought into some bullshit. You have just disproved your own religion, both in its value and in any sense that it could be true. And I verified that you are not going to paradise. So when you reboot and reset next time and become one of the higher ups in Manichaeism, come back and talk to us then.
It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I know it doesn't make any sense. Go back and listen to the call again. That's why we're hanging up, because it doesn't make any sense. But I appreciate the call. And if you come up with better arguments for it or a better reason for us to care, you're free to call back.
That is not what I expected. Yikes.
That's a weird first call. Just because it seems rare. There's all those kind of old religions, and people latch onto them. Now, in Austin's case, it's not like I'm saying there's no value in looking at the world and saying, you know what? There's things that we call good and there's things that we call evil. I agree. But where I differ from Manichaeism and Christianity and Islam and all these other religions is that my view on it is that good and evil are the labels we put on things when we compare the outcome of an action, the consequence of an action, with a particular goal. Your goal may or may not be right, but you're going to call it good. Republicans think they're doing good. Everybody thinks they're doing good. Everybody wants a better world. They just don't necessarily agree on what the better world looks like or which methods are actually effective in getting there. That's where the struggle is. Now, you could say that something like Manichaeism could pacify people, could make them more pliable, could make them more peaceful. One of my favorite religions to bring up is Jainism. Jains are pacifists to the point that they will wear gauze over their face so they do not accidentally inhale a bug.
Yeah.
They will still eat bugs and inhale bugs. It's unavoidable. You have bugs crawling all over you all the time, and all inside your entire gut biome is made up of creatures that are not you, but it's like a little world in there. So their view, while perhaps laudable in the abstract, is both scientifically ridiculous in the sense that it's not going to accomplish what they say, but they're at least trying to make some sort of improvement. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But there's been no demonstration that there's any good reason to make that sort of attempt. And so they're putting effort into something. We live in a world now where people are putting effort into things that I think is ridiculous. Like,
oh, yes.
There are people who are dying from illnesses and they don't have access to health care.
Yeah.
There are people who are dying because of gun violence. There are people who are dying for a lot of reasons. There are people living in impoverished conditions, and we're not making that the focus. But you know what?
Yeah.
The governor of Texas just announced that he's going to be joining up on a bill that will prevent any non-human behavior in schools, which means kids won't get to play or bark or woo, or bark, 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 or any. But also,
What?
it's stupid. It's called the furries bill. It is specifically there to stand in opposition to furries. But the reality is that if a human does it, that's human behavior. By definition,
Yes.
if I bark like a dog, that behavior is human. Because you know who doesn't bark like a dog? A dog.
Dogs.
Dogs just bark. They don't bark like a dog. And so, no non-human behavior. But how are you going to put on a play? Are you going to do this? So they're going to have to carve out all sorts of exceptions. Meanwhile, the Texas Attorney General has declared that the 91,900 trans people living in Texas who have already had their birth certificates and their driver's license changed so that the sex markers there match their gender, they're all void. Now, it's not legally binding yet because he's offering his opinion, but let's be honest, Texas is going to follow his thing.
Yeah.
They're all void and they all have to redo. See, we told you this. We said this was what was going to happen. See, we didn't make trans stuff an issue. The right did. And it's because they're trying to eliminate them one way or the other. And those of us who stood up and said, hang on, you're going too far, and we are going to support and defend these people, all of a sudden, even people on the left are like, you guys are the reason we lost. No, we're not.
Yep.
Oh, we're not.
Yeah.
This is bullshit propaganda. And Trump and those others have already acknowledged it. They just bring it up to rile people up and potentially win an election. And in this case, they did.
Yeah.
Except that they're following through on it. Trump's already issued executive orders about there's two genders, whichever one's originally assigned in your birth certificate stays there, unless it's a clerical error. So now we're going to get into the weeds defining what counts as a clerical error or not. We're going to get into, here's the thing. Sorry, I didn't mean to do a trans thing on here, but
no,
I have a really good idea and I'm on fire. I'm a man. I don't know what my chromosomes are. And I don't know what my gametes are, but I can suspect. I know what's in my pants, and I know how I feel in my head. I'm a man. And on my birth certificate, it says M, and on my driver's license, it says M. There was someone who transitioned who then was forced to put an M back on her driver's license, and then they would not allow her to take a picture for her driver's license if she looked too much like a woman. She would have to redo her hair and take off her makeup and do all of these things so that they could get a makeup-free picture. Now, first of all, there's no reason a cop pulling me over only needs to have a way to identify me. Yeah. I'm a man in the United States and I'm free. Can I get breast implants if I want to? Should I be allowed to do that and still be a man? Well, the answer needs to be yes, and it's been done. Doyle Brunson, famous poker player, on $1 million bet, got breast implants and kept them for some period of time in order to win the $1 million. But if you just wanted to, like if I just wanted to go get breast implants, I should be allowed to do that. You know what else I should be allowed to do? As a man, I've got a real bald head, and my buddy as well. But here we go.
I do indeed.
I used to have long hair. That after I got out of the Navy, I grew it out, put it in a ponytail. Used to have long hair. Is it okay for me as a man to have long hair, or is that too womanly? Do I have to style it in a particular fashion to still count as manly enough? Does the facial hair offset the long hair? And by the way, I should be allowed to wear makeup if I want to. I don't have any makeup on. Sorry. I know there are some shows that are professional and bring in makeup artists and powder everybody. My head's going to be reflective and it's not going to look great all the time because I don't wear makeup. I have once or twice on the show, and I'm not just talking about the drag episode that I did on the other show. I've worn makeup a couple of times to like cover up a spot on my head that was just annoying. But I should be allowed to wear makeup. I should be allowed to wear makeup that actually in any way I want. Now, I would agree that if you have a picture of me and I happen to be in clown makeup, with red nose and all that stuff. The picture on my license isn't likely to match me very well, and that could cause some confusion. But do they then, if they pull me over, do they have the right to tell me to take all that makeup off just so they can verify my ID? What if I'm on my way to work? What if I haven't done anything wrong? Where is this freedom? Where is this freedom as a United States citizen to travel unrepressed and unrestricted through the country? Why is this new version of Papers, Please being pushed by the law and order freedom people? Because there's absolutely nothing that a trans woman can do that I'm not allowed to do. And if somebody wants to say, you don't look like a man, tough shit. There's fucking zero requirement for me to look like what you think a man should look like.
Yep.
Or conform at all. And when you pull me over for speeding, you don't need to know what's on my birth certificate. You don't need to know what's in my pants. You don't need to know my chromosomes. But if the state wants to say, you know what, we've decided we're going to give everybody a social security number. We're going to use that as your ID. And that's the only thing you have to carry around or be able to recite is, here's my social security number. And then the officers log into a system. And from there, they get any relevant government information that they need for that stop. Which means if you want to do a genetic test on me, United States government, and mark down my chromosomes somewhere, I don't care. And you know what? Apart from the fact that it's not relevant or needed for anything I can think of that the government cares about, I can't imagine too many trans people would care either, because trans people aren't lying about what their chromosomes are. And so we live in this world where this tiny 1% of the population has become a boogeyman.
Yep.
And then even on the left, there are people who are otherwise, hey, I'm a humanist, I'm supportive, I support trans rights, I don't hate trans people. I just don't think it's necessarily fair that they participate in this thing. And generally it's sports. And yet the chairman of the NCAA testified to Congress that in the entire NCAA, there are 10, count them 10, trans athletes. How many more kids than that are likely to die in school shootings that we do nothing about? And in this case, the right is doing less to protect kids from dying than it is to further marginalize 10 athletes when it's none of their business and the sporting organizations already have the knowledge and understanding to make the rules that make the most sense for the thing. This is all smoke and mirrors. And Trump, there's a recording of him basically telling them, don't bring up the trans stuff for a couple of weeks. We want to bring it up later, closer to the election, so that it can be a bigger deal. What happened to they're eating the dogs, they're eating the cats? You don't hear about that anymore. What happened to the price of eggs? Anyway, back to the actual Sunday show.
Hey, thanks for watching that clip. Did you know we saw what you were doing when you watched it?
We saw all of it. All of it. All of it.
All of it. So you're going to want to pay us hush money over at patreon.com/calltheline, where you can buy our silence and watch our patron exclusive podcast.